Our final speaker for the day, for this session, should I say, is Mary Russell. Mary combined her two great passions in life, cycling and travel, and took off on her bike for an extended period around Syria. She has written a book about it, and she's going to tell us about it now. And I must say, Mary, I'm very jealous of your travels and cycling.
I was very interested in somebody over on this side talked about the normality, to make cycling normal instead of we all dress up and go off and do wonderful things and so on. And I must say that if I go back in the days during that great rite of passage for one's first Holy Communion, I was actually taken to the church in my white dress and my veil and the white socks and all the rest of it on the crossbar of my father's bicycle. And that was the normal, that's what you did. And it didn't even have those little saddles that went on the crossbars. A cushion was tied onto the crossbar to try and make it a little bit more comfortable for you. So that was, an everyday experience, which does, I think, fall into the purview of normality. I was in. I'm actually standing on my toes. Sorry, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll stand in the middle. I divide my time between Dublin and Oxford, and I spoke to a group in Oxford, a cycling group called Cyclox, a campaign group, very like this one. And I'm so enthusiastic about Syria. It is a marvellous country that they very tactfully, at the giving the vote of thanks, said afterwards, we really enjoyed your talk and you've enthralled us for the last hour, even though you never once mentioned cycling. And I didn't. I suppose because for me, a bicycle is to get you from A to B and so on. As a travel writer, you don't really want the bike to take over and become the main focal point. But anyway, so I went to Syria. I had been going for the last 10 years. And I went there because again in Oxford, I had been travelling to a few Arab-speaking countries, and I decided I really should try and learn the language. And though I tried, I never really did learn it. But my teacher was in Oxford at the university there, and he was from Damascus. And he gave such a great, he taught us not just the language, but about the whole culture. And I thought, yes, that is a place that I would like to go to. So eventually I got there. So I'll just talk a little bit about cycling. Now, I think cycling is quite creative here in Dublin, especially where I live. There's a bit at the top of Camden Street where there's about 5 roads, and some cyclists know that they have a window of opportunity when all the lights are red, and that's the point when everybody starts doing diagonal cycling, and it's really hairy altogether. Well, in Damascus, cycling actually is normal. It's used, the bikes are used a great deal for getting around, but only by men. But they are used, so people will take all their goods to the market. They'll take 3 or 4 children on the back of the bike. And on one occasion, and I don't think Dublin has ever managed to equal this, I did see a guy with a basket in the front of his bike with one of those little portable television sets, and he was watching the television. Well, it took me a week before I got my bike out, and then I even walked around a lot to get used to the streets. But after about 2 or 3 months, I realised on one occasion when I found myself cycling the wrong way up a one-way street in the dark with no lights, and I thought, I kind of feel at home now. I must have joined in with the general populace. One of the things that I cycle also in Georgia, just to take a quick diversion to Georgia. That's the Republic of former Soviet Union, and it was under the Soviet Union at that time. I wasn't able to do an awful lot of cycling because there was an awful lot of control, and I brought the bike, and the people that I was staying with, everybody had to be checked out, and I had to check in, say where I was each week and so on. I said to them, look, I'm just going to go. And they were terrified, and they said, don't, because if something happens to you, and we have big, big lorries, if something happens to you, we'll get the blame. And to be quite honest, I couldn't then decide to be as adventurous as I'd wanted to be. But it was in Georgia. I'm not great, by the way, about bicycle has 2 wheels and gears and all the rest of it, but if you asked me much more about it, I really wouldn't know. The first bicycle I did buy, though, was I bought it. It was an Evans bike, and I bought it in London by Waterloo Bridge, and it had everything, and it cost £1,000, and I was really proud of it. And I bought it because I was doing a long cycle ride down through France. I was actually going to Algeria, and it took me a month to cycle down. And any of you who've done those kind of bikes, you'll know those kind of cycle rides, you'll know that you want to cut down on what you're carrying. And my main thing was I had little, I can't do it now because I've got sense, but I had one of those little tiny saucepans with little tiny fire lighters, and I would boil up my water for my coffee. And then I got really clever, and I would boil up the beans that was going to give me lots of energy and protein and so on. And then I would save that water to make my coffee. So I had bean-flavoured coffee. I don't bother with any of that now. I've got over it. When I got to Algiers, I put the bike on the ferry, got over to Algiers, came back again and put it on the train, because I had been down to the Sahara Desert, and that really was my final destination. So when I got back to France, to Marseille, I just really wanted to get home. I put the bike on the train, and I did what had taken me a month to cycle down. I did that train journey overnight. I got back to Dublin. Oh, great, terrific, back to be home, and so on. And I went to down to the swimming baths at in Rathmines. Chained the bike up to a tree. When I came out, you'll have guessed it, it was gone. After all that. And as I said to somebody, my bike is gone, it was chained to a tree, and they said, you're lucky they didn't take the tree as well. Anyway, so because I don't know an awful lot of things about bikes, I'm not great at mending punctures and all the rest of it. When I was in Georgia, I had the only, I buy proper tyres and so on to get rid of, cut down on the possibility of that kind of thing. In Georgia, I did actually have a puncture, but it wasn't because I had been cycling over rough ground or anything. I was doing that as well. But we put the bike into a truck, and we were going to go out into the great country for wine, so we were going to go out into vineyard country. But the way the bike had been kind of thrown into the back of the truck, it had worn. The tyre had got worn, and right the way through the tyre was the blister of a puncture coming through the rubber of the tyre. All I could do was, I was determined to do that bit of cycling that day. I simply got a bit of sellotape, and I wrapped it round and round the puncture, and that got me the last sort of 3 or 4 kilometres until I get to my destination. In Syria now, because there is a lot of cycling, they're very good about mending things and so on. On one occasion, again, I had a puncture, and I just handed it over to the little 1-star hotel that I was staying in, and it was fixed for me. I should tell you, by the way, that because I'm a shoestring traveller, I go to the cheapest of places, almost the cheapest of places I could find. And one of them was in Damascus, a little tiny family-run hotel that had once been a great, beautiful, lovely house belonging to an Ottoman, an army officer belonging to the Ottomans, and it had that lovely decayed grandeur that we're so used to here in Dublin. And because it was family-run, they really did make me feel at home. And so I stayed there for about a couple of months, and then I went away, and then I came back in. When I came back again the second time, they said, "Oh, great news, we're now a 1-star hotel." And I said, "Oh, great, congratulations, what did you do?" And they said, "We've got a flush lavatory." And before that, it had been a squatting hole. And I have to say that I looked at it the other day on the website, and I saw that people were writing their comments, and an awful lot of people, it made me sad, were criticising it because it didn't quite measure up to standard. But you know, when you're travelling like that, if you get a welcome and a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and so on, that's really what you're looking for. That's more important than all the stars on the, I think so anyway. So in Syria, the three things that made me stand out, that I wasn't aware of it really at the time, was 1, I was a woman. 2, I was a woman on her own. And number 3, I was a woman on her own and on a bike. And they had never seen anything like that before. And that worked great for me. It was actually an advantage to be that, a woman on her own on a bike, because I got hordes of invitations. Please come, please, madame, come, have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee. And I was always glad to do that because I'd been cycling and I was thirsty. Then the next invitation would be, please stay and have a meal. And the final invitation would be to stay the night. And I did that a couple of times. So really, I think, of course, it wasn't just so much being a woman as being on my own, because I think if you travel with other people, you do set up a bit of a barrier, and a language barrier as well as anything else. You just cut yourself off. But this is my experience, traveling on your own, on my own. I certainly did get lots and lots of invitations, which I was always glad to take up. The question of negotiating my way around the place, I tried to learn a bit of Arabic, and some of it worked and some of it didn't. But I do remember, in desperation, on 2 occasions, wishing, why in God's name did I leave my dictionary behind in the hostel? Because a young lad, I've been in a desert town in Palmyra, a Roman, it had been a major city during the big trading route between China and India and Europe. So it was a very important city. It had been in 300 AD. I stayed there in the hotel. I was the only person in the hotel, and there was one boy, he was only about 15, who seemed to be running the whole show, and he was very, very good at it. But he had one fault: he desperately wanted to ride my bicycle. 5. And he fiddled with the gears so much that he actually jammed everything, and I didn't have the word in Arabic for hammer. I wanted a little hammer in order to free up that. The other time that I was stuck for a word was I just wanted to say about danger too. Somebody also mentioned that. It is important. Or do we construct our own feelings about danger? And I think we probably do. As a woman, I'm often asked, was it dangerous? What was it like? Were you safe? And what I do now is I hand that feeling back to the questioner, because usually people are talking about their fears, not about mine. And I refuse to take on my shoulders somebody else's worries and fears. I'm going to stop. The book... Here's the book. Everything is in there. And if you cycled here, or even if you pretend that you cycled here, it's going at the special price of €10. And I do hope you will buy it, because I want to say Syria is a fantastic country. I haven't touched on all the worries and the fears and the terrible things that are happening. I am celebrating the people and the country, and that's what I want to put over to you today.